President Obama tackling federal regulation in that speech yesterday before the Chamber of Commerce, claiming that most Americans welcome government mandates. Listen.
A lot of the regulations that are out there are things that all of us welcome in our lives. Few of us would want to live in a society without rules that keep our air and water clean.
Joining me now is one American who says that the latest rules imposed by the Environmental Protection Agency are not welcome. Steve Malloy is publisher of JunkScience.com and author of Green Hell, joining me now from Washington, D.C. What the EPA does, really out of the purview, out of the sight of most of America, Steve, you think is detrimental in terms of the number of rules that it's setting that harm business?
Right. I think the EPA largely accomplished its mission in the late 1980s, certainly by the early 1990s. And now we're into an era of regulatory overkill. Right now, the EPA is regulating greenhouse gases and killing jobs at the same time. There's a new core steel facility in Louisiana that the EPA is threatening. We're talking about 1,250 jobs. Nothing is going to be gained for the environment by EPA regulation, but there are a lot of real costs.
What are the costs? Because they run it depends on the calculation. They run into the billions and billions of dollars.
Well, right, but I mean, it's beyond just the money. I mean, it's the jobs. You know, there are a lot of reasons that jobs are leaving America, especially manufacturing jobs. Well, one of those reasons is regulatory overkill, and the EPA is the leader there. These greenhouse gas regulations are going to force even more manufacturing and energy production overseas.
The president has talked about it yesterday and talked about it in that Wall Street Journal editorial about limiting the number of regulations or going back and removing impediments to doing business. But the administration has still stood behind the EPA and its crackdown on carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. So how do you fight the EPA then? Well,
you know, as to President Obama, talk is cheap, and he knows it, and that's how he can get away with saying these things that are just simply not true. Now, the way to fight the EPA, and the only way to fight the EPA right now, is for the House, which is controlled by the Republicans, to start slashing the EPA's budget. Now, you know, most environmental protection today can be done by the states. The EPA's role can be way cut back. There's not that much need for federalism in environmental protection anymore. But we need to start slashing that budget. But
as you've seen with California and its regulation of car emissions and car exhaust, and often when it's on a state-by-state basis, doesn't that make it difficult for particularly large corporations to do business in this country?
Well, I'm not saying that there's no role for federalism. You're absolutely right. That's a great point. But there are a lot of local issues that can be handled by the states. You know, recently the Environmental Protection Agency yanked a mining permit in West Virginia that had nothing to do with California or any other state. That was purely a West Virginia issue. And President Obama is punishing West Virginia for opposing his cap and trade bill.
Steve, thank you so much. It was good to see you.
Thanks,
Steve Malloy.